She became aware of it on a morning that looked exactly like all the others. The alarm went off at the usual time. She reached for it without opening her eyes, silenced it on the first attempt, and lay still for a few seconds longer than necessary. The room was quiet, stable, predictable. There was comfort in knowing precisely how the next hour would unfold. She got up, made the bed, opened the curtains just enough to let light in without glare. The movements were efficient, practiced. Nothing rushed her. Nothing surprised her. In the kitchen, she prepared breakfast the same way she always did. The same mug, the same routine, the same measured pace that made mornings feel manageable. As the kettle warmed, she glanced at her phone, saw the notifications waiting, and turned the screen face down again. They could wait. She sat at the small table by the window and took her first sip of tea. It tasted fine, familiar, reliable. She noticed, vaguely, that she no longer paid much attention to taste. It was enough that things worked. That was when the thought appeared. Not sharply, not dramatically. Just a quiet observation she couldn't immediately dismiss. Her life had become very good at avoiding discomfort. She didn't judge that realization. For a long time, avoiding discomfort had been the goal. She had lived through years where nothing felt solid. Changing jobs, uncertain income, decisions made under pressure because waiting wasn't an option. That period had left its mark. It taught her that stability wasn't something to take lightly, so she built it carefully. She chose work that paid consistently, even if it required saying no to roles that felt more exciting but less predictable. She stayed in cities that made sense, not necessarily the ones that pulled at her. She learned how to budget, how to plan, how to think several steps ahead. It worked. Her life no longer felt fragile. Friends described her as grounded, responsible, someone who had things figured out. She accepted those descriptions easily. They aligned with how she saw herself. And yet, sitting there at the table, she realized how rarely her days asked her to be fully present. They asked her to perform, to maintain, to manage. Presence had quietly become optional. She finished her tea and rinsed the mug immediately, placing it upside down on the rack. She noticed how automatic that impulse was. To clear, to reset, to leave no trace behind. Order made her feel calm, but calm had started to feel flat. She dressed for work, choosing clothes that fit well, that wouldn't draw attention, that required no decision-making. In the mirror, she looked composed, put together, exactly as expected. She wondered when she had last felt uncertain about who she was becoming. Uncertainty used to feel dangerous. Now it felt distant. The commute passed without incident. Traffic moved steadily. People around her followed familiar patterns. Headphones in, eyes forward. Everyone moving toward obligations already agreed upon. At her desk, she settled in quickly. Emails answered. Tasks prioritized. Conversations conducted efficiently. She was good at this part of life. Competence came naturally to her now. Time passed smoothly. That, she realized later, was the problem. There was no friction in her days. No moments that slowed time down or made it feel dense. Hours slipped past unnoticed because nothing resisted them. At lunch, she ate the meal she had planned in advance. Nutritious. Sensible. She scrolled through messages, nodded at updates from friends, declined an invitation that felt inconvenient rather than unwanted. Later, she told herself. Later was always available. By late afternoon, she felt a familiar sense of completion. Another productive day. Another set of boxes checked. She packed up her things and left on time, pleased with how little energy the day had demanded from her. On the way home, she stopped at the grocery store, bought what she needed. Nothing extra, no impulse purchases. She took a quiet satisfaction in how controlled her spending had become. Control had once felt empowering. Now it felt habitual. Back in her apartment, she unpacked the groceries, cooked dinner, cleaned as she went. The space returned quickly to its neutral state, as if no one had been there at all. She sat down to eat and realized she wasn't particularly hungry. She ate anyway. Waste felt irresponsible. Afterward, she moved to the couch and sat without turning anything on. The room was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic. Evening light faded gradually. It was in that stillness that the realization deepened. Nothing in her life currently required courage. Not recklessness. Not chaos. Courage. She wasn't asked to risk misunderstanding, or disappointment, or failure. Her choices were designed to minimize those possibilities. Each decision had been reasonable. Together, they had formed a life where nothing pressed against her limits. She thought about moments she had almost chosen differently. A job opportunity she had turned down because it involved uncertainty. A relationship she had kept casual because deeper involvement would complicate her plans. A move she had postponed until it eventually stopped feeling possible. At the time, each choice felt like self-respect. Now, they felt like trade-offs she had never fully acknowledged. Not wrong trade-offs, just expensive ones. She wasn't unhappy. That distinction mattered to her. Unhappiness would have demanded a response. What she felt was quieter than that. She felt buffered, protected from extremes, from instability, from risk, and also from intensity. She checked the time. Still early. Plenty of evening left. She could go out, call someone, do something unplanned. She didn't. Instead, she tidied the kitchen one more time, adjusted the cushions on the couch, and prepared for the next day. Habits filling the space where spontaneity might have been. As she got ready for bed, she caught her reflection again, the same composed expression, the same sense of control. She asked herself a question she hadn't allowed before. What is this life costing me? Not financially, not socially, in time, in attention, in parts of herself that had been postponed so long they now felt theoretical. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The thought didn't disturb her sleep. It didn't create panic or urgency. It simply stayed. She understood then that safety, when chosen consistently, doesn't feel like confinement. It feels like ease, like smoothness, like days that pass without resistance. And that is why it's hard to question. There was no decision to be made that night. No promise to change. No dramatic shift in direction. Just a new awareness settling in. From now on, she would notice when she said no out of convenience rather than clarity. When she chose the option that preserved her structure without asking what it preserved it from. She would notice when time slipped by quietly because nothing asked her to engage fully. That awareness alone altered something. It made her days feel heavier, slower, more deliberate. As she turned off the light, she knew that somewhere ahead there would be a moment when stability and truth would quietly diverge. When maintaining everything she had built would require letting go of something unnamed but familiar. She didn't know what she would choose when that moment arrived. She only knew she would recognize it. And that recognition, calm, unsettling, undeniable, had already begun to change the way she moved through her life, not by demanding action, but by refusing to let comfort remain invisible.